of tobacco in Jamaica? I forgot what they called it.
Generally, they're calling it grabba, or fronta, or fonta, or fronto. There's a few different names for the whole leaf tobacco that they're growing there on the island, and that a lot of the Rastas and community uses.
It's fascinating, because when first time I've ever been to Jamaica was just like a month or so ago. I had never been, and while we were there hanging out, looking at the farm, a couple Rasta came by, and I got to watch. And it's funny because I hung out with tons of Rasta in California, but they didn't cut weed with a knife on a cutting board, and that shit tripped me out, man.
Instead of like a grinder or hand breaking it up,
they sliced it with the knife, and they were chopping it up, and it was just such a
like a machete or
something?
Yeah.
So they had like a little, almost like a small cleaver.
All right.
And they were slicing it, and it was just such an interesting change in approach on how they smoked. And we're having an argument, and like a healthy argument, between one of the younger people at the group talking about how the introduction of concentrates were going to really take off in Jamaica, and some of the older Rasta laughing like, no, that's never going to happen, because that's not how we consume cannabis. Like, they had a very deep cultural connection, and I kind of wondered how it was going to turn out, because I remember when we didn't smoke concentrate either.
Yeah, how are they consuming it down there? Is it like these huge big Rasta joints, or
no? For the most part, like, you had some longer spliffs, but when the real Rasta we hung out with, they all had their own little sack, and then they had their own little head, and that's what you would hold your pipe, and then you would pass. Like, I don't even know the right phrase for it, but you pass it to the left-hand side. You take the bowl out and you move it to the next person. So each person has their own pipe and mouthpiece, but the actual lit
They're passing
assembly,
the bowl around?
Yeah, the bowl gets moved.
What's it made out of, like clay or something?
That was a clay bowl. And then I learned too that when they're doing this, I was asking Bob, I'm like, is this like traditional? And he goes, yeah. He goes, but we as younger Rasta, we like fresher weed. We want it, more terpy, more bitier. He said, but for the older Rasta, they like the older pot. And he goes, and then we even add a little moisture to it to smooth out it, so it's a more gentle hit.
I want to know more about this pipe. So it's a ceramic bowl they pass around.
It looked like a coconut. It looked like a coconut with a hole in it, with the coconut with a hole in the top of it, and then just a straight tube coming out the side, right?
Like, and everybody has their own tube that they plug into this thing?
No. You have your smoking device is the coconut with the tube.
All right.
And then the down spout holds a bowl. The bowls are deep. And so you take that off and you pass that, and then you just hang out, and when the bowl comes back to you, you plug it back in, and then you puff on it.
Smooth?
It was kind of cool. I'm not really a pipe smoker so much. There's something about pipes that I don't dig. I always taste the pipe.
Whatever was smoked in it before.
I taste the pipe, right? So that's why I was like joint, because joint gives me the weed, and
that weed.
Yeah,
you're smoking some Rizlas right now. I know you're smoking a little thicker.
Yeah, this is
straight from yard, huh?
Yeah, this is a bamboo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my buddy sent me a case of them, and it was funny too. Someone said the other day, like, you need to go into the other papers, but I'm like, at the end of the day, any good paper that burns good is pretty good. And if I want something that's like optimal, I like the Modiano, right?
Well, I brought that up because in Jamaica, I can't really use these super thin papers. It's just too humid in Jamaica. And you can't break up the weed this fine in Jamaica. The weed's just too fresh with the humidity. So that's also why they're cutting it, to break it up finer. And me in my hand, I'm just working it constantly.
You got to adjust your method. You got to adjust what...
Yeah, I roll a little bit looser in Jamaica with a little bit thicker of a paper, because otherwise this thing is just going to flop on me. It's just too humid out there for
we got lucky that what we were doing was we were looking at a breeding operation, right? And so when we went back to the house at the ranch, everything was in climate control. Oh, yeah. And it allowed us to have like a more, far more rollability, and the burnability was excellent. It's just that it was all seeded. So what we were doing is every plant we touched, we would break out a container that we would label, and then we would just break up joints over that. So this way we didn't lose any of the seed, because every one of the plants that was selected specifically for their attributes. And so it was kind of cool because...
Were there any standouts?
Oh, hell yeah. There was some wicked standouts. I really got turned on to something called an Orange Pico Cambodian. So it was really... the high was just really, really active.
So they're growing some Cambodian cross down there in Jamaica?
Yeah, it's not so much what they're growing in Jamaica. It's that Charles, who has the ranch in Jamaica, he had an operation in Jamaica, and then they switched up, and then he took on this operation. So he has a couple acres there. It allows him to be able to work in a place that he really likes being culturally. So his relationship with the locals is solid, and his daughters have a beautiful relationship with the locals. So like to him, it's a far more community location to grow. And so he's grown all over the earth, but he really loves growing in Jamaica in terms of like the acceptance and the community feel and how it works. And then his specific location is unusually dry. So it's the driest place in the Caribbean, the whole Caribbean. So it allows him Spanish Town in Kingston. He's got like a microclimate where the whole time we were there, you'd see the storms whip in and then whip right around it and then cover the mountains in rain. Because as soon as we drove 15 minutes into the hill, this shit was coming down in the monsoon. And I tripped out and I was like, whoa. And he goes, yeah, this is a unique little microclimate. And it allowed him to have really dry conditions, which let him work with these traditional lines, you know, the Laos, the Cambodian, the Colombian black was killer. I got turned on to something called the Zacatecas, which is a purple Mexican. And so he had done a bunch of work with these Acapulco golds, and some of those profiles were crazy. And one of them, it had like the smell, he takes it way past prime because it's seed plants, right? So you've already flared off a lot of your delicate shit. But he said, Kev, this one's identical to a sour apple. And I was like, I could see the essence, you know, I could smell it, but it wasn't like hitting me in the head the same way. He was excited, and he goes, Kev, just burn the joint. He goes, I'm telling you, 2 hits into it, this flavor comes on. And I laugh, but I'm like, it was 2 hits into it, and all of a sudden, man, it was a melted Jolly Green apple, you know, like that Jolly Rancher.
Yeah.
This shit was unbelievable. So it was such a true profile in the mouth, and the high was so like thrilling.
And that was the black Colombian?
No, that was an Acapulco Gold.
Okay, that was one of the
And so
golds.
he did the Acapulco Gold lines, and then he had accessed this stock from Mexico called the Zacatecas, which is this purple, this long foxtaily purple. And it's beautiful, but the aroma on it was so intoxicating, where you just kind of swooned in the smell of it. It was so deep, and just you don't see it. So I was just falling in love with really good Mexican cannabis again, because I used to like Mexican cannabis a long time ago, and we just didn't see, we saw American choices coming from Mexico. This was stuff that was chosen by Mexicans. That's what they chose for the production in their country. You got to see their flavors. I got to mess around with some really, really exquisite Panama Red. And that had the profile that was just like a razor blade, man. It cut through the room when you touched it.
And you're talking back in the day or more recently?
This was I haven't smoked Panama Red since probably 79 or 80. And my neighbor Mike, my neighbor Mike's niece, her father Huey was a career trafficker, so he had done 14 years in the federal joint for trafficking and shit. And so I didn't know Huey back when he was then. I knew Huey now as the father of my buddy's niece. And so me and the niece were friends, and me and Mikey are buddies. But Huey always had the super quality herb, and so he always gave his daughter a little bag of it
You
to have
remember
grass.
this Panama Red?
I remember it from then
later.
because it was, at the time, it was so different than the Colombians and the Thais. It just had a sharpness and a crispness to it that was it. It's really, really directional. And so I got to kind of mess around and experience it again, and I was like, wow. And it was just like going back in the time machine. So the Panamanian stuff was really turning me on. That Zacatecas, Mexico, and that Acapulco work was killer. The Colombian black was some really interesting weed. The piffy, hazy, heavy church incense smell left that oily film in the room after you burned it.
That's the one I'm looking for.
That's that Colombian black. And then I got to play with some
that
Zamal.
frankincense, the
Zamal shit was crazy too.
Sandalwood kind of aroma, that scent, that flavor.
Yeah, you can't hide it. And so it was funny too, because we're hanging out with the 2 New Yorker dudes, right? So I go to Jamaica, and with me comes these two New York cats, right, that are just legends in New York cannabis because they're the original Piff Hayes crew. And so White Boy Kev and Jose, they are foundation New York hustle from Washington Heights, right? So to me, they know more about that Piff culture than anyone else I know, and definitely more than I do, because I've been messing with hazes for a long time, but that's not my sole function. But for the groups in New York, they did that same exact plant for decades. So to me, they understand the culture of that type of high better. Yes. And so I said, hey, why don't you come out to Jamaica? We'll all get together, go there, and that way you can go experience the foundations of the work you know so well. And they were friggin' hysterical, right? These guys were hysterically funny and super good dudes. But Joe comes out of the bathroom, and Kev's asking him, like, did it pass the bathroom test? And it was, somebody goes and burns in a bathroom, and then you walk in there and instantly you know. We used to call it like the hallway test or the stair test, where you come you come into someone's crib and you all of a sudden you go, someone's been pissing on the floor. And so we filmed it, right? We filmed that little sequence because I thought it was so funny, and you know what they were doing. But it was just, it was...
Cough does that same thing.
I love, like, when you step out of a room after you smoke something, then you come back in, you know, you kind of cleanse your palate a little bit, and you can really get a sense.
Whatever you guys were smoking, because I walked back down just even 15 minutes ago, it smelled like somebody was burning sage in the living room.
Wow.
I'm gonna be ashing you out over here. Sorry about that. No, it's fascinating to see the longevity of the smoke. But I was saying that Zamal work was really neat too, because Zamal is out in the Indian Ocean, and it's known for these exceptionally long flowering varieties that can grow, almost be like a biennial, where it takes 2 years to complete its life cycle. So it's stuff that's just really out there in terms of duration of
2 years.
2 years, like a year to grow, and because the light cycle, and then so it has to mature and then trigger. And so I've never really had pure Zamal, and I've only had Zamal hybrids, and so Zamal is kind of known for like a carrot flavor, so we call it carrot weed. But there's other profiles that come with it too, and I didn't realize that. And so I got to smoke some really worked Zamal lines that were doable in Jamaica and came in at a reasonable time, just like the Panama Red. The Panama Red's like 14, 15 weeks. No matter what you do, and it just has a longer flowering cycle than a Colombian, longer flowering cycle than the Mexicans.
And those Equatorials, because of that long flowering cycle, or maybe just I don't know if it's a consequence of the flowering cycle or not, but they end up having these unique profiles, that you only get when something goes that deep, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Right?
Bioprotectant, I think, too. Like, the one thing I've noticed, and I got to see it here, too, I had this theory for a long time, and then when you start to see enough cannabis from enough places around the world, you can kind of start to say, okay, it's no longer a theory, I can see some proof. This time was when it was cement. That at the end of the day, stuff that exists in these equatorial belts, from like even a little bit, like say 25 degrees, so 0 to 25, 0 to 25 is a 50 degree belt of space. Everything in it has some similar profiles, and I think it has to do with bioprotection from fungal issues, because every one of them has a high humidity level.
Right? And the same thing goes with hash. Anything from the equatorial regions are historically kind of known for producing flour and not known for producing hash. And the reason is we try and wash some of these equatorial varieties, and they don't wash.
They got the tiniest heads, too.
Yeah,
I did that
African heads that they don't want to release.
No.
Or there's just multiple issues as to why they won't collect in our method. And so it's just a trip to see those varieties kind of coming back in the flower culture, and some other varieties popping in the hash culture right now. It's like
it's happening. It's kind of cool. I like it. I like to see that there's this non-commercial aspect to the modern home cultivator, where for you hate to say it, but not really, we like getting paid too, right? So part of growing herb was smoking it, but part of herb was fucking making money selling it. And so that's kind of wasn't a bad thing. But now you don't have that same ability to monetize it to the same degree on a small level. So what you're seeing is like hypercraft, because they know that the intent is for production, for consumption. And that's what I'm digging, is like when I travel, I get to see it. And so
Which is
that's why this,
beautiful, because then that means we get to see these varieties that take
They come- yeah, and
15, 16 weeks to to complete.
and you'll see them, because at the end of the day, the people have figured out how to work with these type of plants. And if you're able to crop steer enough to where you're choking it off on water so you're not getting elongation, you can kind of compress something. You can go into modified light cycles, you can change spectra. So by manipulating some parameters, we can make things compress, and if we don't put them into too much of a stretch situation in any capacity with like vegetative push on a grow, then you can reasonably get them to fit into a normal size tent. And if you're running leads, then you're not going to have any heat issues if they do creep up. So like you're kind of seeing an ability for it to happen, and you're seeing people starting to really bring these lines out. So I don't think we're going to see them on the farms as much, because they just don't want to finish until mid-November minimum. But on some of the small micro indoors and some of the larger companies that have an ability to do some limited batches, and some of the people maybe like in Monterey, down in San Bernardino, Santa Barbara, they're San Diego, like in Cali, they'll have an ability to do those in their operations. And I think you're going to start to see over the next, 5 years, you're going to start to see some really killer shit coming back on the market that hasn't been on the market in 30 fucking years.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. And really, the thing, I love that we can get the genes and grow them here, but I'm telling you, there's something special about smoking it in a place of origin. It just expresses different, and that's why, like for me, I just have this fixation of I'm thinking about going to Pakistan this fall, because I would love to see hash plants in their real form.
Yeah.
Like, what are they like here? I have no knowledge of it, and so you got this fascination, but you don't have enough education to really understand the nuances. And so each time I get to go on any project that lets me look at something specifically, I allow it to kind of really like take me to where I'm supposed to be. Because at the end of the day, like you only know what you know. And you get old enough, you know most of the shit is wrong. and
you got to do more road, and
you got to keep driving forward and stuff. And so I think that's the beauty of this, is that you're seeing an acceptance of variety once again, because stores don't have it due to financial constraints of production investment. And people are hungry for things they heard about but have never touched. And for the first time with legal seeds and movement of plants, you're starting to see this stuff take off. It's a cool time to be alive in that regard,